Cari amici di Mystery Channel Show, benvenuti a questo Midnight. Vi informo subito che l'intervista sarà fatta in inglese, però potete vederla sottotitolata tramite la rotella che vedete nell'angolo sinistro, sinistro dello schermo, destro dello schermo, e scegliendo italiano potete vedere sia quello che dico io, sia quello che dirà Brien in inglese. Hi Brien and welcome back to Mystery Channel Show.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank to you. Brien, when we meet the first time, we talked about elongated schools and big structures of the past. But today we will talk about another topic, about some other places that you visit, that you saw, that you studied. So, I don't know, what do you will talk about? So, let's begin.
Okay, well, we can talk about a number of locations because in general, my interviews are about Peru, Bolivia, and Egypt.
Yeah.
But there are other locations that are very intriguing, such as Easter Island, Lebanon, where else? Baalbek in Lebanon, Jordan, even the western side of Italy, which I haven't been to yet, to see some very, very ancient structures on the west coast of Italy. Greece has megalithic stuff as well.
So we can begin from the Easter Island if you like.
Sure.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, well, most people think that the first people to live on Easter Island arrived from Polynesia about 1,000 years ago, that they came from Tahiti and that nobody lived there beforehand. But it's quite evident when you go there that there are two different styles of construction. The Polynesian style is very simple, like they build walls with simply stacking volcanic stones on top of another. You see that in Hawaii, you see that in Tahiti and other locations, but there are also megalithic works too. And so that tells us that there was a much more sophisticated culture that existed before the Polynesian era. Also the big Moai heads, which are the most famous aspect, there are 950 approximately, and they come in two sizes. Some of them are 6 to 8 feet tall, and others are up to 40 feet tall. So what that indicates, again, is that the small ones were made by the Polynesians, copying the much larger ones that they found when they got there, say, 1,000 years ago.
But I have one question. How far is Easter Island from the Chilean coast?
About 2,300 miles, I think.
I don't know in imperial miles, I know in kilometers, but
okay, in kilometers, I would say approximately 3,000 kilometers.
Okay, the big question that I ever did to myself is how they get there, which kind of ships, if do you know something like that?
Well, the Polynesians came from the Tahiti area, which is to the northwest, and they were very good at building double hull canoes that could travel great distances. So they may have had ships as big as 20 to 30 meters long with sails, and it's not that difficult to get from one to the other. The problem is that Easter Island is so small that how would you possibly find it? It's only, say, 8 kilometers by 12 kilometers by about 15 kilometers in size. So you'd have to be very close to it to be able to even find it. So that's the biggest question, is how is that possible?
Yeah, but a lot of people always wants to know which is the meaning of these big phases that are towards the sea. No, for example, which is the meaning, and I know, and you can tell me if it's true or not, that there are some places where these phases were carved from the stone, but they are laid down they are just in the yard. I don't know if it's correct what I say.
Okay, well, almost all of them actually face inland. There are only 7 that face the ocean. So the standard story when you're on Easter Island is the local people say that each one represents a high-level person, like a chief.
Okay.
So that's why there's so many of them. And then the reason why most are lying down, they only started to do archaeological work in the 1950s. That was started by Thor Heyerdahl. And what they started to do is raise them back up. And what happened was that the islanders themselves knocked a lot of these down, especially once the Christian missionaries came to the island and introduced Christianity. Then the people started to turn away from their old belief system and actively damaged a lot of their old artifacts like that.
But who are the builders, in your opinion, and for which purpose this work was done?
Well, again, if you talk to local people, there's a written language called Rongo Rongo, which is unique to Easter Island. You don't find it anywhere else in Polynesia, which is kind of odd, but the local old historian I talked to said that that originally came from the Indus Valley in India. And when I asked, what is the history of Easter Island, he said, how far back do you want to go? Because he believes that there were many different groups that went to Easter Island over the course of thousands of years. Possibly the ones from the Indus Valley were escaping from being attacked by an invading force of some kind.
But in your opinion, in this case, we can talk about some alien influence in this particular island or not, in your opinion? And if there is an alien influence, tell me why.
Well, it is possible. I never say categorically that it could not have had alien influence. We simply don't know. But if you look at the size of some of these constructions, it was way beyond the level of technology of the Polynesians. They didn't even have metal tools of any kind. They had rocks. And so some of the work on Easter Island is so precise that it would have required very advanced machining, cutting technology like what we see in Peru and Egypt. So, you know, either it was a very advanced ancient culture that disappeared, or it could be that there was alien influence of some kind.
Somewhere I read that in the north of South America, maybe is in Brazil, but I can be wrong. There was an ancient population called the Olmeki. I don't know if in English the word is Olmeki, Olmecs, I don't know. And they were as like people from Africa in the faces, something like that. Okay. I don't know if you ever studied this kind of population and their artifacts, but I would like to know something more about this population and the mystery behind them.
Okay, yeah, the Olmec actually lived in the eastern part of Mexico, around Veracruz, and they supposedly were responsible for carving these giant basalt stone heads that weigh 10, 20, 30 tons, but there's no evidence, again, that they had any kind of technology to be able to do that, and a lot of these heads were found buried. So during excavations, only the top surface of the head was exposed. So that makes me think more that those heads were carved by a very advanced civilization long before the Olmec, and that the Olmec discovered the artifacts like that. We also see other volcanic glass artifacts that could not have been made by hand. They had to have been made by machines, and that was backed up by American engineer that I saw these artifacts with. I said, could you make these by hand? And he said, no, that's impossible. So it's an example of where academics are trying to explain a story that they don't fully understand. They want it to fit into a very simple picture, but the evidence points to something much more complicated.
Okay, you talked about academy, yeah? And I would like to know which is the scientific explanation that the archaeologists gave to Easter Island or Olmecs in this particular topic, for example.
Well, they don't have an explanation. They simply dodge the question. If you ask them, how is it possible, they won't answer the question because they are arrogant. They think they have all the answers. And if you don't follow their story, then you get ridiculed. But since I've seen all of this stuff in person many times, and I have a construction power tool using background, I can see that technology had to have been responsible, not simple tools.
Between your travels, you said that you went in Italy. I don't understand in which part in particular. So now we can fly ideally in Italy. Tell me.
Well, yeah, these are again stone constructions similar to what we find in places like Peru and in Egypt, like massive outcrops of stone where steps have been carved into them. And I think the standard story is that the Etruscans were the ones who did the work. But as far as I know, they didn't have the level of technology to do them. So I think they're from a much older culture that were prescribed to the Etruscans, but they weren't the actual ones who did the work.
But how many bigs are these blocks of I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen 6 to 10 of them, and they're the size of a house or a small apartment building. They're not small.
And in your opinion, who makes these walls and for which purpose in this case?
Well, again, we don't know who it was. It was either, again, a lost civilization or possibly extraterrestrials or a combination of the two. They appear to look like they're ceremonial in function. So whether that was the use by the Etruscans and later people or not is the big question.
But why, in your opinion, this ancient civilization like superhuman or maybe aliens done something like that? Everything big, everything very heavy. Which is your theory about that?
Well, that's a really good question. In Egypt, for example, it seems that a lot of the early construction was done as for a very pragmatic function. Like it appears that the pyramids were energetic or energy-producing structures. In Peru, it looks like they were more ancient retaining walls. So in Italy, since I haven't been to see these in person yet, I don't really know. I just know that there are curious things on the western side of Italy that don't fit in with the standard story that we've been taught in school.
But why, in your opinion, if the academy doesn't have any answer to these ancient sites, they try anyway to give us an answer instead to say, "Oh, we don't know."
Well, that's the curious thing, but the more that people look at these from a very practical, from practical personal experience, the more questions we have. And then when you read the standard story, that's when you see the story doesn't make any sense. So the academics are trying to evade being questioned about these things because they think they're the great experts and they don't think we have the right to ask them questions, which I think is quite stupid.
Okay, so now we will fly again towards East So we will go in Middle Orient. In you say Jordan, Jordania. Okay. So which is the sites, the city maybe that you saw, and what you saw?
Okay, well, there's a site which is world famous called Petra, and
Okay.
everyone knows that from one of the Indiana Jones movies because there was a short bit of the film that was done there. But what people don't realize is that Petra is about 11 kilometers long. It's not just the little area that was put into the Indiana Jones film. It goes for 11 or 12 kilometers, and we did walk all the way from one end to the other. And you see all of these almost impossible constructions in the bedrock, massive chambers carved into the bedrock, almost perfectly smooth vertical surfaces going up 20, 30, 40 meters, and they just go on and on and on and on. Again, the standard story was that it was an Arabian people who did the work, but it's clear that those people found it abandoned and occupied it. So it's an absolutely spectacular location, and very close to it, about half an hour's drive, is another site called Little Petra, and it's a continuation of these massive chambers and columns and everything carved straight out of the bedrock.
And what the archaeologist says about this city, if I don't remember bad, it was occupied from the Romans even, no?
Yeah, it was actually before the Romans. It was between 200 BC and 200 AD that people called the Nabateans were there. And academics claim that they did all the work. But, they were people who literally arrived on camels. So I don't think any of them were technologically advanced to be able to do stonework like that. But they did occupy the location. They built up quite a large empire. They made it a trading center. But we see lots of evidence of machining marks, 3 different kinds of machines being used to cut the surfaces of the stone. And that's something that didn't exist until very modern times. So once again, it's a question that there was a very advanced civilization that did the work. They left the location for some reason, and then it was refound by the Nabateans. And then when the Nabateans started to disappear, then the Romans moved in, and they did a lot of work there as well, but nothing very sophisticated. They did Roman work like you find in Italy, but nothing technologically advanced.
It's Italian, so. But but you going around the world and watching, staring at these big buildings, I don't know, I don't remember if I did this question, but I will do it again. Which was the function of these big facilities, in your opinion? Did they were big batteries, or I don't know, houses? What they were, in your opinion?
Well, again, it depends on where you go. So in Egypt, there's a lot of evidence that whoever did the work, they were building energetic devices of some kind. So the pyramids could have been energy generators. The obelisk could have been energy receivers. Most of ancient Egypt was built on purpose underground in the bedrock, which is only slowly beginning to be opened up to people who visit, which is a good thing. So that, there are many levels of tunnels and shafts that go under the Giza Plateau and way beyond that. And each time I go, I get to visit locations I hadn't seen before to see more and more examples of this very advanced technology having been responsible for all of this work. The dynastic Egyptian work is all on the surface and is inferior in terms of construction as compared to the older stuff. So there's a very dramatic difference between one and the other.
Okay, but you told me that you went to Lebanon too, and what can we see in this place, in this country, about
Okay.
places? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the main site is Baalbek.
Okay.
And so what you have there is you have a very big complex carved out of or built out of stone, and then about 1.5 kilometers away you have the quarry, and in the quarry itself there is a famous stone called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, which weighs 1,200 tons. And recently they excavated one right next to it on the left-hand side that weighs 1,600 tons. So they're still attached to the bedrock itself. They were never moved. But when you go to the location of Baalbek itself, you see the lowest level is made up of, or this one area, stones weighing 400, 800, 1,000 tons. And then above that, you have the Roman layer, because the Romans came and occupied the location. And the stonework is smaller. And then above that, you have construction from the Middle Ages when the knights were in there building fortresses to defend themselves from invaders. And it again is less sophisticated. So the lower level is the most sophisticated. The top level is simply recycling the stone that was there.
Usually, who doesn't believe in the theory of the ancient astronauts make this question: why, if the ancient civilization had this special technology for makes this kind of works, we don't have any evidence of these technologies?
Yeah, that's the most common question, is where are the tools?
Yeah.
And I think, I think the tools were brought there, they were used, and then they were taken away again. Because, that gets more into the possibility of it being aliens or extraterrestrials, that they came, they did construction for their own purpose, and then for some reason they left and they took their technology with them. Because we don't find anything much in museums or around the area that would indicate that this technology ever existed. We just have the stonework itself.
But in your opinion, which was the mission, the hypothetic mission that this ancient aliens civilization had for came in the earth? In your, if you have an opinion about that?
Well, I think in general what they were building were energetic facilities. It's possible that they came from an environment where they found that conditions on Earth were not comfortable for them, and so they had to build these buildings and underground tunnels and things in order to be able to alter the environment to make it more comfortable for them to exist. I think that's what we find, again, especially in Egypt, where at the Serapeum at Saqqara, we have these 100-ton boxes made of stone, like 2 pieces of stone for each box. And, of course, they're labeled as being sarcophagi or tombs, but I think it's more probable that their function was in order to be able to re-energize themselves.
Some idea that in the ancient times there were a race and breed of giants in the earth, so they built all these things. What do you think about this theory?
I think it's possible. The only problem is there are a lot of people who study giants, but I've never seen any giant bones. So some people say that the museums are hiding the evidence, or governments are hiding the evidence. It's possible that if these were aliens, that they were taller than normal people. That again is where these giant boxes are fascinating, because they're much bigger than a normal human being. So why would you build something out of stone much, much bigger than a normal person to be used for burial? So I think that's where the evidence is that they were built for beings much bigger than us, and that they were energized in order to be able to act as energizing structures for these beings that felt uncomfortable in our normal environment.
But which other places that you visited recently in this year or last year, I don't know, you want to talk about this evening?
Well, actually, what we've mainly been looking at. Well, I also went to Turkey in September 2019, and Turkey has so much amazing ancient stuff. It's an incredible place. Most people are now acquainted with Göbekli Tepe, which has been dated at least 11,500 years old. There's radiocarbon evidence of that. It could be much, much older. It appears to have been buried on purpose. But there are many other locations too. There's a tunnel that was carved out of the bedrock called the Titus Tunnel, very close to the ocean, and it's about 2/3 of a kilometer long, cut into the bedrock. And again, it's called Titus because it was named after a Roman ruler. And so our guide kept insisting that the Romans did all of the work. And it's like, no, that's impossible. Also, the underground
Purpose of this tunnel, which
What's
was
that?
which was the purpose of this tunnel, as you said.
It appears that it was for directing water. It was for moving.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it's huge. It's about 30 meters tall,
Yes.
and 20 meters across, and 2/3 of a kilometer long. Cut out of stone, out of bedrock. So when our guide said the Romans did it, I just, it's like, I thought, okay, that's what he learned in school, but that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Then, of course, there are all of the underground cities that are in Turkey. The most famous is called Derinkuyu, which goes down 20 levels. But there are between 200 and 400 of them, some of them connected by tunnels underground. So how do you explain that? By, again, a relatively technically primitive people doing all of this work? It's like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
So, in your opinion, even this city, Derinkuyu, was built by an advanced civilization that, for some reason, feel the necessity to stay underground the earth?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, again, it was built for some kind of purpose, and then was later adopted by local people who also used it to live underground. Their excuse was that they did it to protect themselves from invaders, which kind of makes sense. But whether that was the original reason for making them is completely unknown. But at Derinkuyu, you're allowed to go halfway underground. So about 10 levels underground, you're allowed to go down. They say it's 20 levels, but it could go farther down. Just because they say it's 20 levels doesn't mean that it doesn't go deeper than that. But they only let you go 10 levels down, and it's incredibly elaborate, carved out of relatively hard stone, quite narrow, so only one person would be able to move through the tunnel at one time. And yet they say the population was 20,000 people. Also, giant air shafts were cut in order to feed fresh air to the people living underground. But who built those shafts again? Cutting into the bedrock is another big question.
And how long, in theory, they spent for build this city?
Well, we have no idea. It's just I know that the local people who existed 2,000 years ago could not have done that work. They didn't have, they maybe had some copper tools, but that's it. So it would have taken hundreds, if not longer, years in order for them to be able to do it. So I think they simply found them and used them. We found, again, ancient tool marks there, so it looks like a very advanced cutting technology like what we see at Petra and at Baalbek and in Egypt and other locations.
One theory wants that in the ancient times, in this zone of the world, I mean Middle Orient, Middle East, I don't know how to say in English, and maybe even in India, there was an atomic conflict. Some people, some alien maybe did a war, and could be in this case the response for survive to an eventual fallout. In your opinion?
Well, yeah, it could very well be. It's actually Pakistan where they have evidence of radiation still that is very ancient. And so that's the main location that there could very well have been some kind of atomic war. And of course, when you look into the ancient Indian texts, you see, India at one time occupied Pakistan. In the ancient texts of India, they talk about major wars of the gods, coming from the sky, flying in these giant ships called vimanas, shooting energy weapons and things like that. And I doubt if those were stories simply made up. They're probably relating to some truth in ancient history. So that's, that's very interesting. But it definitely seems like these underground structures were made to keep these people, whoever they were, isolated from the local they didn't want to be with the local population for some reason. They wanted to be kept secret.
So you think that when there were the humans on the earth, there were another population from other places?
Yeah, I think it's quite possible that there have been a lot of visitations by different you could call them off-planet beings that came here for different reasons, some for good, some for not so good. But yeah, I think the more evidence that's being released now, even in very modern times of, governments talking about UFO sightings that they can't explain, technology that they see that they can't explain, that we're finally entering an area where we're allowed to to learn this information.
The first time that we talked, you talked about elongated skulls. I don't remember if we talked about the fact that this kind of heads of skulls could be found almost everywhere. But you told me that in the zone Paracas, where you went to saw these elongated skulls, these people had a different DNA.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Okay. So why we can found, in your opinion, elongated skulls in some other part of the world? The DNA of these skulls is human, and why they have these elongated skulls? In some way, they try to appears like our creators or something like that. I don't know. It's a question.
Well, in all of these cultures, and you find them up until relatively recently, but you find them in places like Melanesia, also in Europe, supposedly in Egypt, of course, in Central and South America. It's all the result of head binding because the elite or the nobility wanted to make themselves look different from the common people. So that's the common theme. The difference with the Paracas is that we have physical evidence that they were not Homo sapiens sapiens. They were not humans. They were something maybe similar, but not exactly the same. And the two groups with the largest elongated skulls are found here at Paracas and then also around the Black Sea area of Eurasia. They're larger than normal. They look very similar, and the oldest ones show that they were born with elongated skulls. So that's, again, that's something that academics do not want to talk about.
But the people that bended their head, they did it because they want to be similar with these other creators, maybe creators, or just for be distinguished by normal people. That's all, and this was all.
Well, they wanted to distinguish themselves from what the normal people looked like. So they were probably trying to emulate some, some people or beings that they had experience with. I think that's the common idea. So that, that's why it's a kind of an ongoing thing. The Maya people of Mexico did this. To some degree, the Olmec did this as well. But all throughout northern South America, they're even found in Australia, and they've been carbon dated to being 11,000 years old. So
But
these were not.
Sorry? Yeah, but in this case, in Australia, they were humans, or they have the same DNA of the elongated skulls of Paracas?
Well, I don't know because I don't think they've been DNA tested, so I don't know about them. I think we've done the most extensive DNA testing of the Paracas so far. Most of the other cultures that did this, it was simply head binding. But in Paracas and in the Black Sea area, we see evidence that originally they were born like that, and then as they began to breed with normal-looking people, the elongated skull features began to disappear over time, and eventually they simply looked like normal people. As the ancient DNA became watered down, it began to disappear.
Before, when we were talking about Turkey and we were talking about Derinkuyu, you said that probably the city of Derinkuyu was underground because the original population that lived in this place, in this underground city, want to be kept secret in front of the other people that lives on the normal level of the ground, no? So now we will go out from our topic and we will talk about another thing. It's possible, in your opinion, that someone lives in the earth, underground the earth, but is not human, and they have a kind of secret facilities, secret bases, or something like that. And we will discover them maybe in the future.
It is, well, there's a lot of talk of that. There's a lot of talk of the Earth being hollow. A lot of talk about secret bases being found in Antarctica and places like that. So it's not really something that I do too much work with. There are a lot of other people who study those possibilities. I come from a much more scientific kind of background, so that's where my studies go, and I don't speculate on places I've never been to. I only base it on my own observations. So that's as I said, that the Turkey's fascinating because of these underground cities, and there's just so much amazing stuff that doesn't make sense when you hear the normal story of them. That it makes you obviously question, how can you say that this was made by these people when you don't have any actual evidence?
But in South America, we have some other strange things, for example, because somewhere I read that when the conquistador went to South America and they asked to the Indians that living in these places, who built these cities? They said, we found them. So even them say that we didn't do these things, no? And the question is always the same. Can we be sure that someone from another place came here and do all these jobs, all these things?
Yeah, well, it's obvious that the local population could not have done them. The Inca were a Bronze Age people, so they couldn't have built the big constructions, and that's what the chronicles of the Spanish say, is that when they first entered the city of Cusco and they saw the huge constructions, they asked the local people, "Did you build this?" And they said, "Or your ancestors?" And they said, "No, this was here when we got here." So they themselves were saying that the antiquity of the area is much older than what standard academics say. And the academics, again, they can't explain how this work could have been done with the technology they found. None of them are practical enough to be able to take the bronze chisels and try to copy or replicate what these things are. That shows a level of laziness or arrogance, I think.
I don't know if you ever heard about some pyramids that are in Romania.
I've heard stories of them, yeah.
Have you ever been there or no?
No.
So I can make any question about Romania. Okay. For this evening, I don't have any other question to ask. But if you have some other things that you want to say, tell me. It's not a problem. If it's all right, okay. We have just finished. Tell me.
Okay, well, it's just that I haven't been able to do too much, obviously, for the last year because traveling has been heavily restricted. So, but now that's opening up. So we have a big tour happening next month here in Peru that's been sold out. And we have another one in August that's sold out. Then in October, I go back to Egypt for my 9th trip. So we're going to get access to locations I've never been to before because the government is opening up sites that previously were prohibited. So that's very exciting. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is being able to begin to travel again, because it's, honestly, it's been very difficult to be restricted in terms of where you're allowed to go and not. But now the world seemingly is opening back up again. And I'm really happy about that I'll be able to start making more trips and be able to make more videos to put on my YouTube channel and have more discoveries and be able to discuss with you this stuff.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, for this evening is everything. I want to say thanks to Brien for being my guest. And I would say, if you want to subscribe to my channel, look in the link down below in the description. And I hope that my accent is not so terrible like the first time. But anyway, I'm not native, so forgive me. Thank you, Brien, and see you soon.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.